any hurry, but we're not going to be able to deal with every verse in the book of Genesis. It's 50 chapters long. It's a big book, and it is a crucial book. I would say that it is the most crucial book that you understand, that I understand, that we understand, if we're going to understand the Bible. It is the foundation. It's the book of beginnings. And you're going to have to excuse my handwriting. I got terrible handwriting as the years have gone by. I just scribble. Just asked Devin on the notes that I give him. He probably can't. He's probably used to it by now. But I'm going to try to just put some little things up here to guide us along as we go through the book of Genesis. Now, to start us off this morning, let's look at a quick video giving an overview of the first 11 chapters. So let's look at that.
The book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and its storyline divides into two main parts. There's chapters 1 through 11, which tell the story of God and the whole world. And then there's chapters 12 through 50, which zoom in and tell the story of God and just one man, Abraham, and then his family. And these two parts are connected by a hinge story at the beginning of chapter 12. And this design, it gives us a clue to how to understand the message of the book as a whole and how it introduces the story of the whole Bible. So the book begins with God taking the disorder and the darkness described in the second sentence of the Bible, and God brings out of it order and beauty and goodness. He makes a world where life can flourish. And God makes these creatures called humans, or Adam in Hebrew. He makes them in his image, which has to do with their role and purpose in God's world. So the humans are made to be reflections of God's character out into the world, and they're appointed as God's representatives to rule his world on his behalf, which in context means to harness all of its potential, to care for it, and make it a place where even more life can flourish. God blesses the humans. It's a key word in this book. And he gives them a garden. It's like a place from which they begin starting to build this new world. Now, the key is that the humans have a choice about how they're going to go about building this world. And that's represented by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Up till now, God has provided and defined what is good and what is not good. But now God is giving the humans the dignity and the freedom of a choice. Are they going to trust God's definition of good and evil, or are they going to seize autonomy and define good and evil for themselves? And the stakes are really high. To rebel against God is to embrace death, because you're turning away from the giver of life himself. This is represented by the tree of life. And so in chapter 3, a mysterious figure, a snake, enters into the story. The snake's given no introduction other than it's a creature that God made. And it becomes clear that it's a creature in rebellion against God, and it wants to lead the humans into rebellion and their death. The snake tells a different story about the tree and the choice. It says that seizing the knowledge of good and evil are not going to bring death, that it's actually the way to life and becoming like God themselves. Now, the irony of this is tragic, because we know the humans, they're already like God. They were made to reflect God's image. But instead of trusting God, the humans seize autonomy, they take the knowledge of good and evil for themselves, and in an instant, the whole story spirals out of control. The first casualty is human relationships. The man and the woman, they suddenly realize how vulnerable they are now. They can't even trust each other. And so they make clothes and they hide their bodies from one another. The second casualty is that intimacy between God and the humans is lost. So they go and run and hide from God, and then when God finds them, they start this game of blame shifting about who rebelled first. Now, right here, the story stops, and there's a series of short poems where God declares to the snake and then to the humans the tragic consequences of their actions. God first tells the snake that despite its apparent victory, it is destined for defeat, to eat dust. God promises that one day a seed or a descendant will come from the woman who's going to deliver a lethal strike to the snake's head, which sounds like great news, but this victory is going to come with a cost, because the snake too will deliver a lethal strike to the descendant's heel as it's being crushed. It's a very mysterious promise of this wounded victor. But in the flow of the story so far, you see this is an act of God's grace. The humans, they've just rebelled, and what does God do? He promises to rescue them. But this doesn't erase the consequences of the humans' decision. So God informs them that now every aspect of their life together, at home and out in the field, it's going to be fraught with grief and pain because of the rebellion, all leading to their death. From here, the story then spirals downward. Chapters 3 through 11, they trace the widening ripple effect of the rebellion and of human relationships fracturing at every level. So there's a story about two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain's so jealous of his brother that he wants to murder him. And God warns him not to give in to the temptation, but he does anyway. He murders him in the field. So Cain then goes on to build a city where violence and oppression reign. And this is all epitomized in the story of Lamech. He's the first man in the Bible to have more than one wife. He's accumulating them like property. And then he goes on to sing a short song about how he's more violent and vengeful than Cain ever was. After this, we get an odd story about the sons of God, which could refer to evil angelic beings, or it could refer to ancient kings who claimed that they descended from the gods. And like Lamech, they acquire as many wives as they wanted, and they produce the Nephilim, these great warriors of old. Whichever view is right, the point is that humans are building kingdoms that fill God's world with violence and even more corruption. In response, we're told that God is broken with grief. Humanity is ruining his good world, and they're ruining each other. And so out of a passion to protect the goodness of his world, he washes it clean of humanity's evil with a great flood. But he protects one blameless human, Noah, and his family, and he commissions him as a new Adam. He repeats the divine blessing and commissions him to go out into the world. And so our hopes are really high, but then Noah fails too, and also in a garden. He goes and he plants a vineyard, and he gets drunk out of his mind. And then one of his sons, Ham, does something shameful to his father in the tent. And so here we have our new Adam, naked and ashamed, just like the first, and the downward spiral begins again. It all leads to the foundation of the city of Babylon. The people of ancient Mesopotamia, they come together around this new technology they have, the brick. And they can make cities and towers bigger and faster than anybody's ever done before. And they want to build a new kind of tower that will reach up to the gods, and they will make a great name for themselves. It's an image of human rebellion and arrogance. It's the garden rebellion now writ large. And so God humbles their pride and scatters them. Now, this is a diverse group of stories, but you can see they're all exploring the same basic point. God keeps giving humans the chance to do the right thing with his world, and humans keep ruining it. These stories are making a claim that we live in a good world that we have turned bad, that we've all chosen to define good and evil for ourselves, and so we all contribute to this world of broken relationships, leading to conflict and violence and ultimately death. But there's hope. God promised that one day a descendant would come, the wounded victor who will defeat evil at its source. And so despite humanity's evil, God is determined to bless and rescue his world. And so the big question, of course, is what is God going to do? And the next story, The Hinge, offers the answer. But for now, that's what Genesis 1 through 11 is all about.
Every major doctrine in the Bible is found in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. So the first 11 verses, or the first 11 chapters, are very, very important. The, of course, creation story is where we begin. And we're just going to quickly move through some of this. I want to just point out a few things to you. The word Genesis, of course, means beginning. And we get our word gene, the gene pool, our genes, comes from that word Genesis. This book describes the origins of the universe, the origins of humans, the nation of Israel, and that's going to take up the most part of the book. The first 11 chapters and then 12 through 50. Man, my hand's not steady like it used to be. So my scribble gets worse and worse. So the first 11 chapters covers the creation of the world, the early history of mankind, the fall, the flood, the origin of nations. And the second part is going to focus on God's covenant with Abraham. That's what he meant when he said the hinge between those two sections, 1 through 11 and then 12 through 50. The hinge, or the key thing in between, is the call of Abram, or Abram, or he became, Abraham. This second part is going to focus on the covenant with Abraham, the story of his descendants, especially Isaac, and then Jacob, and then Joseph. Those are the key persons. We're going to see God's faithfulness despite their repeated failures, just like us. All of our failures. God is faithful to his promise, and he leads God's people to the eventual migration to Egypt. So, when we think about the first 11 chapters, we call this the primeval time. This is just meaning the beginning time. And then this section here, 12 through 50, we're going to call that the patriarchal, meaning it's dealing with the patriarchs, the key people's names. You've got to understand. I've got to understand if I'm going to understand the Bible. In the first 11 chapters, we've got creation, the fall, the flood, and then the nations. Now, we're going to spend some time looking at specific things in this area. We are going to spend some time on Genesis chapter 6, which he referenced in the film or in the video about the controversy about who are the sons of God. Are they really angelic beings who cohabited with women and produced a supernatural race called the Nephilim? Or as some people say, that they believe that the sons of God just means these were the godly line who intermarries with the ungodly line. The only problem is that doesn't produce supernatural beings. We'll look more carefully at that. The flood. Have you ever wondered why God killed everybody on the earth except for one man and his family? Have you ever wondered about that? Do you feel like in some way God is not just in doing that? I think all of us in our human minds reflect upon things like that, and we struggle with those thoughts. And as we go through the Word of God here in Genesis, there's going to be several things you and I are going to struggle with. Meaning, we don't quite understand why God did this and that the way he did it. But we have to come back to the fact that God makes no mistakes. God is holy, he is just, he doeth no wrong. But we're going to see some things like the flood, and then after the flood, the beginning of the nations. And then when we get to chapters 12 through 50, we're going to focus, of course, chapter 12 is Abraham. God calls Abraham from the Ur of the Chaldees. He's a wicked man. He's an idol worshiper. He wasn't looking for God. God came to him and called him. And the Bible tells us that Abraham left his home, and God said, I'm going to make of you a great nation, and that I'm going to bless all the nations of the world through you, Abraham. Abraham couldn't have a baby. He and his wife, of course, they tried and tried and tried until, now God had promised they were going to have a baby, that he was going to be the seed, the promised seed, the miraculous seed. But for many years, Abraham got to be the age of 100. Sarah was the age of 90. And the Bible tells us that they both were past the prime of their life, that they reproductively were dead. And God has not promised or given the promised child that he gave the promise about in the earlier chapters. Well, we see that God does give them a miracle child, Isaac, when she was past being able to, her womb being able to give a child, and him, of course, the same way. So that child was born, was given to them, and then God says, kill him. Offer him as a sacrifice. God doesn't make sense sometimes to our minds. Why would God tell me to take the promised child and to give him as an offering, a sacrifice? Well, of course, it was a test of sorts. And you know the story how that when Abraham took his son up to Mount Moriah, he told those servants at the bottom of the mountain, we're coming back. Well, how did he know that? He believed God. By faith, he believed the promise of God. The way it's put in the New Testament by the Apostle Paul, Abraham staggered not at the promise of God. He was steady. And so we don't know what he was thinking going up to the top of Mount Moriah, but evidently he was believing God that even if I do plunge the knife in my son and he dies, that he will be resurrected. We're coming back down because God has got to fulfill his promise of blessing all the earth through the seed of Abraham. That's Isaac. So God has to keep that promise. Our minds can't figure it out. They couldn't figure it out. We can't figure out a lot of things. We just have to walk by what? Faith. What God says, and we many times don't understand. And then Isaac has Jacob. Now you got to remember these names. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And then who comes after that? Joseph. The majority of pages in the book of Genesis is given to Joseph, describing Joseph and all that he went through as he was sold into bondage, and we'll get into all that in the weeks to come. But the reason God took Joseph into Egypt was to save the family later on. And what family is that? The Jewish family, the Jewish nation. So that's just a brief overview. Let's begin to look, first of all, at creation. Got to what? Got to click the color? Okay. All right. Well, let's choose red. Where does it give you those options? Don't worry about it. Though. Okay. Y'all don't have to teach me this. This is the first time I've ever used one of these. All right, so creation. Let's read from chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's a mouthful right there. That's a humongous statement. God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be." This is a key phrase that you're going to see. Let there be. Let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. Now, before we continue reading, I want to ask you, when's the last time you read the first chapter of Genesis? Maybe it's been a long time, or it could be you've never read the complete chapter. The chapter of beginnings of the Bible. The chapter that if you don't understand this, how can you understand anything else? Because this is the basis, this is the genesis, this is the beginning. And all things are dependent or look back to this beginning. Verse 6, and God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Verse 9, and God said, Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Verse 11, and God said, Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. Verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Verse 19, there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. Verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Now, before we read verse 26 and on down, we could never, ever study the book of Genesis and not read the first chapter. Every word of it. What have you noticed? You keep seeing the words. What do I do again? That?
You make it red.
Okay. Thank the Lord for these teachers. We see certain phrases repeated over and over again. God says, let it be, or in other words, I want it to be. He spoke it. And then you see all of those, now why is it doing that with my finger?
Because your fingertip is thicker than the pencil tip.
So I can use my finger?
You can use your finger, you can use the eraser side and it'll be a different color too.
Okay. This is getting me confused here, off track. Did you notice it kept saying, according to their kind? In other words, the different kinds of the animals, they would only breed according to their kind. There were boundaries. They would according to their kind. Same thing with the fruit and the seeds. Every fruit had seeds within it, which was the basis whereby it could replenish. And like things that you cut open, you don't find just one seed. Usually you find a bunch of seeds. And God made all of that to be self-propagating. And another thing that he says, and it was good. He saw that it was good. Now, is it possible for God to create anything and it not be good? That is part and parcel of His nature. He does not create evil. He does not create that which is detrimental. He always creates that which is good. And I forgot to mention a minute ago, He created all of this ex nihilo, which means out of nothing. He didn't take something and then take all the creation. He did it all from nothing. He spoke it. Now we're down to verse number 26. And this is the key concerning man, concerning his creation that He makes in His image. Verse 26, then God said, after doing all this the first 5 days, and now, then God said, let us, who is the us? Make man in our, who is the our? Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. Who's He talking about? Well, we see the beginnings of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, right here in creation. So He says, we're going to make man in our image, meaning that we are image bearers of God. You and I, that's why it's so important to protect life. God, we'll see, talks about life and about protecting it. And if someone kills someone else, sheds their blood will be shed when we get on to further chapters here. But so God created them in His image. Verse 27, in the image of God He created them, or him. Male and female He created them. Verse 28, this is what God always does. He blesses them, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, subdue the earth, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Here is the dominion mandate God gives to the first man and woman, and has given to all of us who have come from the first man and woman. And God said in verse 29, and notice the definite God said. We've seen that several times. God said, God said, God said. God said, let there be, and it was. He says in verse number 29, and God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So in the Bible, you find that the number 6 is the number of man. He was created on the sixth day. The seventh day, 7, is the number of perfection. You see many correlations in nature and mathematics. You see in all types of things that God, in his creation, fills these patterns on and on and on it goes. 7's the number of perfection. Man always comes short of perfection. 6. God is 7. He is perfect. And here we see that God has done his crowning work. He's created all of these. First, the expanse, the sun, the moon, and all the stars. And it just says, and the stars. And we cannot comprehend how many stars there are, how many galaxies there are. We live in the Milky Way galaxy. But the telescopes that man has invented, and the Hubble telescope, there might be one after the Hubble, can't remember, but they're able to see further and further and further and further. Have y'all seen that picture of, it looks like millions and millions of swirling things in these photographs? Each one of them is a galaxy. And it just says, and God made the stars. All of the heavenly bodies in the sky that we've been able to observe, first with the naked eye, which we'll see that under the night skies in Genesis chapter 12, God told Abraham, look up and count the stars. And with the human eye, it's impossible to count all the stars. But from what he could just see, there's been estimates of how many, with just the naked eye, how many stars a person can see. But God was showing him his handiwork. And he said, Abram, I'm going to make your seed as many as the stars in the sky. And he says, go to the sea or the desert sand, look at all the sand, the kernels of sand, the grains of sand, and I'm going to make your seed like that. And through your seed, he tells Abraham in chapter 12, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Not just the Jews that are going to be created a little bit later here in Genesis 12, but all the families of the earth, all the Gentile nations which we make up, we are made up of, the Gentiles. God says, through this promise, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Well, when it says here in chapter number 2, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done. He rested on the seventh day from all his work he had done. Now this is very important. Does God get tired? Does he need to rest? But why does it say that he rested on the seventh day? Well, I believe that it is to show us God is communicating something to us in the creation story. Look at verse 3, chapter 2, verse 3. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Here's the law of rest. Here is the example of God resting, though he didn't need to rest. But there is a pattern that God establishes, that man is to work 6 days, and on the seventh day he is to rest. And we go further and see that it's a time that we give to worship, the worship of God. So, when it says in verse number 3 that God made it holy, what does that mean? What does the word holy mean? Tell me. What? Set apart. It's not like the other 6 days. It is set apart. God has blessed the seventh day, we call the Sabbath, in which the Jewish people, through the law, they were not to work on the Sabbath day because God made it holy. He set it apart. He made it sanctified because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. Now, we're not going to be able to get into much more of this creation story, but remember this: the first 11 chapters of the Bible, you can find every major doctrine of the Bible. So I would say the first 11 chapters are pretty important. Would you not agree to that? And we'll look at those more carefully beginning next week. We're going to close at 10:20 each Sunday school hour to give 10 minutes to go to the restroom, to fellowship, and to get ready for the service. Let's pray. Thank you for your word, Lord, that gives us wisdom and shows us that which we would have never understood had you not given it to us, communicated it to us through your Bible, through your holy word. Bless each person here today in Jesus' name.